Centacorns, companies worth of $100 billion or more. Europe has plenty of unicorns. The question on this stage now is whether Europe can build companies an order of magnitude larger and what it would take politically, economically, and structurally to get there. Please welcome Hendrik Brandis, co-founder of Early Bird Venture Capital, one of Europe's most active deep tech investors, and Jens Spahn, member of the Bundestag and former Federal Minister of Health. Give them a big hand.
Yeah, thank you very much for the warm welcome. Thank you, Jens, for coming and giving us the opportunity to discuss, I think, a vibrant topic which I'd like to position in 2 minutes before we get started with the discussion. The relative decline of wealth in Europe, also in Germany, can be very much rooted back to the absence of the creation of hyperscaling companies. If you look at Euro stocks in comparison to S&P 500, they've been on par up until 2011, and since 2011, there is a gap widening of 3x. Especially if you look at the last a couple of years, if you take out the most valuable 10 companies on both sides, the gap is gone. It is our inability to create the multiple Centacorns. It's not even Centacorns, it's multiple Centacorns. Companies like SpaceX or others who create a huge wealth. So if that is the diagnosis, the question is, what hinders us to let these companies grow and develop in Europe? My hypothesis is, and this is what I'd like to discuss with you, there are 3 reasons. One is lack of ambition. And this is obviously something which goes to my own address and to the entrepreneurs. I have too often seen that entrepreneurs and investors are too happy to create a unicorn, and if they have created a decacorn, they take the money and run and let the company go and be acquired by US investors or whatever it is. But at least companies in the wealth creation is going to somewhere else. Obviously, own problem. And I think we got to be more ambitious. It has to be clearly said, we want to create hyperscaling, very large companies, triple-digit of billion in wealth. That's going to make a difference. By the way, we need 2 companies. If it is 10, which make the difference on the level of US, Germany is 20% of the GDP of the US. We need 2 to make it up, just 2. The second reason why I think we are lacking behind is over-regulation. And we have in our portfolio, I know you guys have made the same experience, too often experienced, that innovative companies are suffering through limitations created by regulatory authorities. And that it is like, you know, the picture you're pushed into the water in a swimming race with a lead vest on it. Yeah, and we try to get that lead, we try to get rid of that lead. And this is a topic we very much like to discuss with you, what can be done in that regard. And finally, of course, we are lacking the significant amount of growth capital. It obviously needs to come in the amount we need from private sources. We have to think about creatively how to redirect enormous amounts of every year newly invested capital from predominantly allocation into government bonds into growth capital. Just as an example, German insurance industry is investing 300 billion euros newly every year, predominantly, as I said, in government bonds. If they would reallocate 10-20%, it would make a day and night difference for an industry. So this is just to set the stage a little bit. And with that said, I'd like to hand it over. The question, as I said, ambition is probably our own issue, and we have to work on it. But over-regulation, there we need help. What can be done to bring down regulatory barriers what we currently face?
First of all, thank you, Henrik, all of you, for having me. Actually, in the first couple of minutes I've been here, I've already felt more optimistic vibes than I have felt the rest of the week so far, because of obviously our political situation right now and even more our difficult economic situation for 3, 4, 5 years now of stagnation and recession that obviously is an obstacle in many, many regards and actually leads. Then if you don't have growth, by definition, if someone wants to have more, someone else needs to have less. And that leads to political fights, other fights. So we need to get out of this by reforms in many, many regards. But what I do see in the area of deep tech, startups, companies, research, that there is a very different mood, actually, in many, many areas, and that's good to see. When it comes to ambition, if you allow, I would add something, because we are ambitious too in a way we haven't been before. Example, in our coalition treaty we say, and the government says now, we want to build the first fusion reactor in the world. Not China, not the US, but us here in Germany, with the companies that are there in Munich, Darmstadt, Greifswald, wherever. We want not first approach is not by funding, but by giving the order to build one as a state. Or when it comes to, we have written down this nice sentence, we want to have the first German astronaut on the moon. That is a simple sentence to say, but to make that happen, you obviously need to engage much more in the area of space, which is very much a state-dominated area, at least in Europe. In the US it's changing. Needs to change here as well, but nevertheless, if you have that ambition to have the first German on the moon, that actually means you have to invest a lot to build up an ecosystem in Germany and Europe around the space. And so actually there is ambition as well set by the government and by the state. And this ambition is actually formulated in the high-tech agenda for the first time. We don't do everything at the same time with small amounts, but we are spending billions in the upcoming years in 4, 5, 6 certain areas like fusion, quantum computing, biotech, space, and other areas. That's new, this kind of ambition, which is good. Second, when it comes to regulation, I would say we have started in some areas. I know it's not yet enough. One thing is the European level, and of course the German government can make a difference on a European level, because if Berlin and Paris and some other capitals actually have the same approach, you obviously can make a change in Brussels and in EU regulation. And that is what we have started with the so-called omnibuses. We just had a decision last week on the AI Act to have an exemption for industrial machinery. We would have loved to have one for medical devices as well, so AI can be used in a more deregulated way and to collect data than in other areas. So step by step, myself, personally, I would say let's get rid of the AI Act at least for some years. But if you can't have this approach, to have more deregulation is one other thing. And what we are discussing, last point, on deregulation right now is, and that is for the upcoming weeks, the cost of failure. It's not just regulation, it's the cost of failure in total. What do I mean? It's not just for startups or new companies, it's for Bosch, for example, or all those companies that need to transform, to adapt to the situation, to build up new areas and to get others down. When it comes to hire and fire is very, very expensive in Germany because there is no certainty. You need billions as a big company like Bosch, 4.5 billion just to get your staff adapted to your current situation. And for someone who is to invest in a factory in hundreds of thousands of people, of course they think about what would it cost if I fail. When it comes to fire people, when it comes to how long does it take, that's an area of regulation, the labor market, that we have not discussed for almost 20 years now, more or less. But I think if I compare it, even, especially to our European neighbors like Denmark or the Netherlands, flexicurity as a keyword, that's an area where we can deregulate, which must not mean less security for the employee, but in a different way. You don't protect the defined place of working, but you protect the worker and help him to change if the industry changes. So actually that is, I would say, the biggest task, one of the biggest tasks for the upcoming weeks.
So I think flexibility in labor law is a huge opportunity. I fully agree, and I keep my fingers crossed going to pass the legislation. May I double down on the regulatory point another time? I'd just like to give you an example. We've been suffering investors from lithium, and the perception of lithium's failure is that there was $1 billion missing in order to get the plane certified. There's another reason, because that missing $1 billion was only needed because of a regulatory requirement of the EASA. And the EASA has decided 8 years back that the lithium plane has to fulfill the same security levels as an Airbus, which is 10 to the power of minus 9, 10, sorry. And 9, sorry, 10 to the power of minus 9, while helicopters are 3 orders of magnitude more risky. So they get certified 10 to the power of minus 6. And between minus 6 and minus 9 are easily $1 billion of additional development costs. The FIA in the US, the respective regulatory authority, said, okay, these eVTOLs are replacing helicopters, so we take the helicopter security level and not the jet security level. And as a result, the two US competitors, despite the fact that they have inferior technology, are in prosper and good condition, succeeding, and lithium and also volocopter are gone. Now my question is, we have hundreds of these independently acting regulatory authorities in Europe and Germany, and I'm actually having no clue how even a government can get that under control. How can we encourage, to say it positively, in EASA to come up with regulatory requirements which help innovation, which help new planes, new aircrafts, new whatever, getting into market instead of killing them?
Well, I would say there are two areas. One is like space or fusion or quantum AI, when it comes to a certain branch or area. And then you have the regulatory framework. For example, other area fusion. The problem right now is if you want to build a fusion reactor under current regulation, it's like building a nuclear plant of the old style, with very highly regulated, though the risk obviously is much lower. So we need to set up a new fusion regulatory framework that needs new laws, but with a different approach. Or when it comes to space or air, then you need to change the regulation, the law on the European or German level, and then the bodies, the administration can take different decisions. But then there is the structural regulation, like, as I said, labor market, when it comes to reporting, CSRD, and on all this stuff, to get it, the number of companies that need to report down by increasing the level of staff or turnout you need to have before you need to report. Another one would be financial regulation, by the way. What kind of equity do you need in certain areas? Or what we are doing this week and the weeks before in Parliament, for example, when it comes to notaries. You know, in the US, you do DocuSign and all this stuff very easily, and in Germany, you still need to sit down somewhere and listen to it for hours, perhaps, and then actually you just sign. And we are digitalizing that as well right now. We have several laws in Parliament, one this week, to make that easier as well. So that's the structural regulation for all areas, and then there are certain areas, and that needs to be discussed specifically then if we want to deregulate in the field of air or fusion or stuff. And that needs different approaches, I would say. And for that, it's good to be here, because then we can get a good feeling where is there an area where there's a development, research, that needs an adapting of regulation, that needs an exchange of both worlds, I would say, to actually just be aware.
I think you mentioned already important areas. Nuclear fusion is definitely one. As you may or may not know, demonstrator of marble fusion is erected in Colorado, unfortunately, so we have to hopefully bring back the prototype to Germany.
Yeah, but we are trying right now, or to make it possible, is, I mean, we do have the, like Biblis or Neckar-Westheim, the cities where the nuclear plants stood, one needs to say, were operating so far. And of course, there is an environment where you can build up the new plants. And that is what some of these companies try to do, and we try to support it with the federal states that are involved to make it possible. And a company like RWE is involved as well to build up an ecosystem and opportunities and a certain location actually where they can do it. What we need, I mean, and the high-tech agenda regarding nuclear fusion actually already has started to have that process for laser fusion and the magnetic approach, to have several companies in competition. At the end, there are one or two that get a contract by the state to build, then finally, needs some more years obviously, but then finally the new fusion reactor. And of course we want to support it on every step, and that means a certain location as well.
I understand, and I very much appreciate it, that you are addressing the various areas. I think it's complicated because we have to have initiative for, you know, air regulation or air traffic regulation, for fusion, for artificial intelligence and what have you, biotech, yeah? So that all needs to be taken care of, and I very much hope that the government, beside all the other activities you need to do not forget this very important lever to propel further innovation. I'd like to come up with an additional question in that regard, and please apologize if it's slightly provocative. I was able to listen to Joe Kesa in an interview he gave recently, and he was asked in his experience with large organizations what is the most impeccable approach to reduce bureaucracy, and he said the only way what is going to work in his experience is to reduce staff who is administer the bureaucracy, just reduce capacity in order to get this done. So if I now look at the evolution and the development of public employment and the size of the German administration, I have the feeling that we are moving into the wrong direction. Is that true?
Well, again, that's as well answer. In some areas, we have a big increase of public employment, but it's important to see the areas. It's security, defense, the army, many thousands, police, the federal police, for the airports and the traffic stations and the border, and some other areas where we actually want to, like, by the way, it's not public state, but public funded in the area of health, hospitals, nurseries and others. So that has really increased in the past years. And then there is a classical, I call it classical administration, like a ministry or any regulatory body or whatever. And there we have an agreement to bring down public employment by 8% on the national level. And we have started already, 2% per year to go down. And if you ask me, can that work? I say yes, because we have done it already after the reunification. We never had more public employees than after reunification, because all of the former DDR came into the workforce as well. And then we brought it down 2.5% per year for almost 30 years, till 8 years ago. Every year, 2.5% down the number of employees of the Federal Republic. Then we saw a shift, and it increased again several years till last year, and now we start again till 2030 to bring it down by 8%. But the exemption is for the army, for police, and some certain areas where we want to have more staff. So yes, I do agree, of course, you need to bring down public employment and administration as well, but at the same time you need to deregulate. If there is a regulation still in place, but the civil servants are not there anymore to implement it or to be your partner to implement it, then actually I would make some problems as well. So I would say to get people, the number of people down is right, but at the same time, of course, you need to change regulation as well.
Yeah, I mean, that connection is the wanted one. If you bring down the number of people, you do not have an alternative to deregulate. That's the idea of it.
It's true, but then, for example, I mean, if you take the pension administration, Deutsche Rentenversicherung, German pension security system, they employ around 50,000 people. I would say if you would set it up right now on a green field, you would need 500 people and AI, because it's actually just calculation. It's mathematics. That's all it is, a pension system. But of course, it's old software. It's not on a green field. You need to step by step transform it. And of course, it's a working system that you need to change, so it needs some time to adapt. But in theory, of course, you could run our federal pension system with some 100 employees and AI and digitalization. But if you are working with a system that has a history of decades, you obviously, and that counts for big companies as well. I mean, all our banks, some are still running on software systems of the 70s. It needs some time if you're not just starting on a green field to adapt.
I love that example. Shouldn't we then just do in parallel this greenfield approach? Because 400 additional or 500 additional employees, it wouldn't make the difference. And as soon as it's up and running, just systematically get rid of the other 40,000?
True, I see the approach. There's one issue. If there's the first of a month and the pensions are not transferred to the right account of 20 million people in Germany, that is really a problem. They need to live off it. So actually, you need to have a transformation that gives the 100% security level that it works. If it does, of course, you can. But I would say we're on the way, step by step.
So in that regard, I would remind ourselves for the first point of ambition.
But the new Ministry of Digitalization, you know, I have to admit, me personally, at the very beginning, I was not very much in favor. Because I've been deputy minister in the finance ministry, then in the health ministry, many other areas. And I always said, if this ministry shall regulate health tech, the health tech area, or e-health, or fintechs, or legal tech, or whatever, the Ministry of Health or the Finance Ministry, they are the ones who need to regulate that area because they know all circumstances. But this new ministry that we have set up now is actually digitalizing the federal administration. It's not about regulating or deregulating all these areas outside of government, but to deregulate and digitalize the government itself and the administration. And that really makes a difference because till now, it was in the finance and in the Ministry of the Interior. And the Minister for Domestic Security, actually, he only can do on a Friday afternoon. He can look after digitalization if it is a good week, because there are so many other topics on his table. Now that we have a ministry and a minister for it, you really can see the change of speed, because there's one minister just doing this one thing, and he's really implementing it. And for the first year, I would say we see the difference already.
Okay, as a citizen, I must admit, it is not obvious to see how ambitious the government is in that area with respect to reduce public employment and bureaucracy. At least the perception has not come through to me. Maybe it's my personal problem. But I'd like to use the remaining minutes to address the third point as well. Because we were talking about ambitious, and I was pointing to myself. We were talking quite intensively about deregulation. Still, we need the fuel, the capital, to drive hyper-scaling companies, because we're living in times of concentrated growth, and concentrated growth companies, very much different than in the area of the first German economic miracle, where the growth was vastly distributed in the Mittelstand. 10,000s of companies who were carrying, the economic growth. Now it is extremely concentrated. I was talking about 2 companies missing, and that requires extremely concentrated investments as well. So we have to build the huge investors who can provide that capital in order to be competitive. I mean, just as an example, I gave that the other day as well. The last OpenAI funding round was $122 billion. The entire growth funding in Germany in 2025 was 8.4 billion euros. So one round, one company is, 15 times as big as the entire German growth funding for a whole year. So that gives us a sense what an order of magnitude is missing. And if I then learn about winning initiatives, which is a little disrespectful, a bookkeeping exercise, because it basically lists all what the institutional investors want to do anyways, and then encourage them to do a little more, but it may add $1 billion a year, but we need 100 billion more. So it can only go, so we need to think about how to redirect the significant investment, the pool of capitals we have, institutional capital as well as private savings, into growth capital, which is beneficial for the economy. So any idea how that can be achieved?
Well, actually, obviously there's plenty of money, billions of money in Germany, in Europe, that search for investment, still there. And they even come from the US, at least they want to rebalance their risks with the developments in the US. So actually they try at least to find good areas of investment in Germany and in Europe. What I'm advocating for, and it's not working well enough yet, I agree on that, is, we do 500 billion fund for infrastructure, public fund. We do have defense spending tripled and then quadrupled. By the way, Germany, after the US, China, and Russia, has the fourth biggest defense budget in the world, meanwhile. After China, US, China, Russia, now it's Germany. And then the question is, how is it spent?
We're the fourth largest economy, so it's not surprising, right?
Well, for Germany, it is quite surprising, and I can tell you our neighbors start to ask questions. That's true as well. But nevertheless, there's plenty of public money. We do have other areas like our Autobahn GmbH, the motorways and others, where we want to, or the grid, the investments in the grid, where actually I would love to see more leveraging of the public money that we invest with private money. And right now, the approach is too often still, we have one money of debt we make publicly and spend that €1 in, what I don't know, infrastructure in a new street or railway or whatever, instead of really using funds, the KfW, other ways to leverage it and to bring private money in. With the grid, we do it already. In our grid network, the billions we need to spend, there's actually almost only public money that works, but in other areas, it is not. And then, of course, you can set up funds, or funds of funds, like we have started with KfW, in a bigger size, and with a different tickets they can make. If the state itself, but that is not what you meant, I guess, should not spend 50 billion or 100 billion in the most risk area. And I'm not sure if that would be well-spent taxpayers' money, but to leverage it and to help to set up a framework that makes it possible for pension funds. I mean, we already discussed it 10 years ago when I was in the finance ministry that we need a different regulation for pension funds, for example, and our insurances as a whole, to make them invest more in the VC area. That is still something we need to work on. It has started, the Standortfördergesetz. I don't know Standortfördergesetz in English. Nevertheless, a law that made it easier to invest as a fund in private companies and in other areas. We have started. Actually, by the way, the new private pension system that we have set up as a third pillar, beside the public system, with more ETF, more share spending or saving than before, that all is starting to change the financial environment in Germany and the framework we have. We are some years, if not decades, behind other countries, especially UK and the US when it comes to this. But at least I would say we have made a change in the past months no one has expected, and too many have not realized yet, especially when it comes to private private pension schemes.
Well, you mean growth investors and venture capitalists are always impatient. I think the speed of change is way too low, given the challenges we have in front of us. I'm still wondering how we can, carve into the 300 billion institutional investments every year and get them deredacted from government bonds. And I think this is...
I would say, as a Minister of Health, we had done a study that said, back then we had almost zero interest rate, and we said, let's take 100 or 200 billion from the capital market, set up a fund like Norway does and others, Singapore, and then we have, I don't know, 6-8% of...
Why haven't you done it? You should have taken a trillion.
I can tell you why. There was a pandemic coming. We had that study done. We wanted to start the discussion and then start the implementation. For my party to say, to take 100 or 200 billion of debt, new debt, to invest it.
Was exactly right.
Yeah, but when they hear 100 billion of debt, they get afraid. So
I get 100 billion in assets as well. Is this just a Bilanzverlängerung?
You and I know, but for the public discussion, you need to have some public discussion to convince people. Many react. The first reaction is so much debt. Additionally, but then if you start to explain it, that you invested like other state funds do, that you have a return on investment, that you have, if you do 100 billion and you have 6 or 8 billion per year, that you can use to stabilize the social system. That actually was the idea, to stabilize the elderly care system by this. Then you can explain it. The problem is, right now the interest rate for federal bonds is 3.5, going up even. Of course,
it's still a good deal. Yeah,
because a good deal, but the story is less convincing than it was 5 years ago.
That's definitely true. But I'm, thinking that the state may not only be able to give own money, but can also pay with its creditworthiness by setting up structures, fund of funds, where it actually only secures the downside. And by taking off the downside, bringing in the liquidity of the institutions in situations where the downside in reality does not really exist. I do not want to carve into public money, but all studies say if we have 250 non-correlated growth investments, the effective downside is zero. So the state could easily guarantee it without any risk, can cut, the upside and take, the exceeding upside of above 5%, whatever, as a fee for the guarantee. And that would be going extremely fast. We can start next year and we can talk about tens of billions.
Yeah. Since we seem to be overdue, I say yes.
Okay,
Are we not? Are we?
Okay, everybody heard it. We do it. No, we're overdue, so I apologize.
No worries.
Thank you very much for this lively discussion.
Thank you. Wait, I have one question. I think it's a little important because people came for the Centacorns conversation, which the title is. So, companies worth 100 billion plus, right? Europe doesn't have any. You spent 30 minutes talking about regulation and capital, both real problems. But honestly, name the European company most likely to become a Centacorn in the next decade. One name, no diplomatic answers.
Who are you asking? You want to go first or shall I? So the next is Revolut, and the next after that is ESA Aerospace.
Thank
you. Actually, ESA was in my mind as well. I would say one of the fusion companies as well. I really believe in nuclear fusion, and I believe in the German companies that we have, one of them.
Bravo.
Thank you so much for your answers, and thank you so much for an interesting conversation.